Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Badge, choosing the right ServiceNow partner in 2026. The goals of this presentation, we want to help you avoid a few things: frustration, technical debt, shotgun RFPs, where you're just trying to find somebody to dance with, so to speak, and all that churn that's associated with it. My name's Eric Smith. I'm the VP of Global Solution Consulting at Endaro. I've been working on ServiceNow since 2010, most of that time as a BPC and a solution architect. But the last 8 years have been in pre-sales leadership, helping our clients go to the toy store and understand what's possible. Christine?
Hello, everyone. Christine Morris. I am Senior Director of our Consulting Services. I've worked in the ServiceNow ecosystem for well over a decade, and many of those years I actually spent as a customer, as a platform owner. In my last role for a large global manufacturer, I started the Richmond Snug and served as the leader of that for several years. And I bring, I think, an interesting perspective. I spent about half my ServiceNow career as a customer and have used a variety of partners. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And now I'm, on the partner side. So looking forward to kind of talking you through this journey. And the choosing the right partner is so important. So excited to be here today.
And for the folks listening, I really want to call out a couple of things Christine said because I'm jealous, that she has that experience of being where you are, being a ServiceNow customer and trying to make these hard decisions. So as she shares some of her points, make sure you listen for that she's been exactly where you are. So Christine, when it's working well with a partner, what are the green flags that that a customer should look for?
Yeah, well, so I like to kind of look at it in these three pillars, right? So to successfully run your platform, you really have to account for all of them. So I'm not gonna read all of these to you. I could talk about ServiceNow all day long, but they don't allow me to do that endlessly. So I'm really gonna focus on some of the key items in each of these kind of three pillars. For envision and roadmap, being with you for the journey, right? You really want a partner that that to use the word partner, right? That actually partners with your organization. They don't treat your project like a one and done. They're helping you sequence your phases intentionally. They're focused on, building toward that long-term operating model, right? Not that short-term win. And the right partner is thinking a couple phases ahead, right? They're helping you with that roadmap. They're making sure that you understand and make the best decisions, right? So that you're building something that you can grow into, not something that you'll outgrow. I think another one is adoption, not just implementation. A strong partner doesn't just measure success by the go live, right? We've implemented your technology, we've rolled it out to your people. They're thinking about, are people using it? Is it, behaviors changing? Is the value being realized? And they challenge you to define what success looks like in terms of usage, efficiency, outcomes, and not just we turned it on.
Yep. And that adoption piece, I mean, we've called a few elements of that out here, and you're going to get to a couple of them, but yeah, I want to broaden the point as well. Adoption, frequently you think of user adoption, and that's going to be UX and something that's logical. That's critically important. But I think about platform adoption. Is the customer going to be successful on ServiceNow and keep it around? And there's so much that goes into that. Having a training plan, having a testing plan, governance, an upgrade cadence, understanding how frequently you're going to upgrade and what you're going to do when that time comes, and also considering data retention. If you have regulations that require you to keep data a certain amount of time, there are certain things that can force you to keep data a certain length, but you also have to consider, well, how long do we really want this data around? On the other side.
Yeah, good point. And that kind of, looking at what we've outlined here and implement and develop, I think not saying yes to everything is a big one. In my experience, right, I had my first partner, they didn't say yes to everything. They challenged us during the implementation. And, we ended up with a very much, aligned to out of box, using the right features. After I left that organization and I went to a global manufacturer who had been on the platform forever, they actually had done whatever they wanted, right? And there I had a partner that would say yes. I was early on in my ServiceNow career, so I was like, oh yeah, do this. I didn't know better, right? I was still learning the platform. So I think it's critical that a partner really is there to challenge you, right? They're, help you make decisions that you're not going to regret down the road. And then I think the another big one, right, is just that, and I hit on this a little bit, and I just can't say enough about having the right employee experience, right? As IT, we think like IT, right? So we're going to add a category called hardware or peripherals, right? A really good partner, is going to do their due diligence and help you with, how that employee thinks, focusing on the user's experience, right? They're going to go looking for computers, not hardware, right? And having that portal experience be something that's really going to drive the adoption on the platform. You really want something that somebody's actually going to use. And when you don't focus, right, on employee experience, they go to the portal, they have a bad experience, then you don't get that adoption. So, I mean, if users have to be forced into the system, then something went wrong, right? A good implementation is going to feel intuitive.
Yeah, and there's a word that isn't on this slide that I think drives a lot of this, and that's curiosity. Curiosity is critical, and you'll feel that when it's coming from the right partner, that they just keep digging, they keep driving to understand your business, curious about not just your company, but your industry, and also what your users' experience has been to date. So maybe they can improve it. But having curiosity, that genuine drive to understand, and willingness to ask the next question is going to drive a lot of this, I feel.
Like, yeah. And then getting into kind of that last, the manage and optimize, we want to make sure, and some of what we talked about in those earlier pillars feeds into this, right? We want to make sure that, that there's not technical debt, that you've got a great, life cycle to manage your platform. One of the biggest challenges that we see with partners is, if you're not focused on how you're governing your platform, it quickly becomes a mess, right? You've got people beating on the door, or you're not getting the usage of the platform. And having a partner that really understands the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve versus just enhancements, right? Mature partners anchor their roadmap in conversations and outcomes. They ask, what business problem are we solving? They help you prioritize based on measurable impact. They prevent backlog sprawl and technical debt. So giving you really the skills that you need to continue to manage your platform.
Well, I was just going to add, there's one more thing to listen for. Those green flag clues. Speaking your language, or at least trying to. And by trying to, I don't mean faking it. You'll know that you've been in your industry, you live in your industry, but at least trying to, at least beginning to adopt the language and the way you think about your end user and your business, and then beginning to mirror that in these conversations. I think that's a good tell, a good green flag, if you will. Let's consider some of the red flags and things on the other side to look out for. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to do this in context of the different partner types, because that's important to know too. And we're also going to share a little bit about Andaro and how we've approached things differently. So, Christine, in the context of the different partner types, what are some of the red flags that potential customers should be looking for?
Thanks, Eric. We've talked a little bit about some of those, right? Saying yes to everything, doing just enhancements that are not, technically feasible. Um, what we really want to talk about here is, all there are different types of partners. We're not saying one partner type is good or bad, and each of these models exists for a reason. But when we look at the programs that stall out, fall behind, or never really deliver the value or the expected outcomes, we tend to see some common themes tied to that partner model. If you're looking at staffing-based approaches, right, the engagement is often tied to an individual rather than a team or a methodology. So if that person rolls off, the knowledge goes with them. It can also take longer to get momentum because you're sourcing individuals instead of bringing in a cohesive delivery approach. It creates higher risk, especially for strategic programs. Um, with resellers or VARs, they're really focused on licensing, right? And services are just part of that broader portfolio. So your engagement can become much more tactical. You might get strong support around licensing, but not necessarily that strategic guidance that's going to drive the adoption and long-term value. Niche partners, right? These folks, they are an expert in a particular area of the platform. And that's great, right? When you're in that area. But as your platform starts to expand out to IT or HR or accounts payable, right? That narrow focus can become a challenge and it's harder to see the full picture. With the large GSIs, you get scale, you get global reach, there are some cost economies. But again, it's really very much focused on what you're asking them to do. In my own career, I had a GSI and they would do anything I asked. And early on, I didn't really know what I shouldn't do myself. So I would have them do customizations that would, that ultimately down the road allowed me to not take advantage of features. So you really want to have somebody, that has that broad expertise across the entire platform.
Yeah, and having worked, for a few of these different silos, I'm not going to call any specific silo out, but what I am going to do is just tell you some red flags that I think you should look for. That, in my experience, some of these silos are more prone to than others. One example is treating ServiceNow like a ticketing tool. It's evolved so far beyond that. Or using IT service management to then build something custom on it. In a lot of cases, something that ServiceNow already does, like HR service delivery or integrated risk management. I've seen that. You don't build those in ITSM. You adopt the great tools that ServiceNow has already built.
Mhm.
That creates technical debt quickly. You don't want to go down that path. And then also always seeming to have an immediate answer. Now, when it comes to the platform, you're probably talking to a solution architect on this call or somebody at that level. So they might have legitimate, quick answers on what ServiceNow is, isn't, can't do. But when it comes to you and it comes to your goals, objectives, outcomes, and the way you want to progress on things, yeah, we can do that. After something along those lines, that should be a little bit of a red flag. Poke at that and maybe ask the question, well, where else have you seen this work at a company that looks like us? All right. So how do you do this? We're going to give you a few tactical recommendations on navigating partner selection. So a couple that I think you should do. Don't be afraid to score and stack rank partners as you talk to them against your own criteria. What's important for your business? What's important for this project? But also what you've seen fail before at your company. This probably isn't the first software uh, capability or platform that you've implemented at your company. What went wrong? And then score against things that you think caused that, or things that could have helped you avoid it. Make sure you're, being a little relentless and scoring and stack ranking, if you will, and don't be afraid to ask the partners for some of those metrics. You see here some of our metrics, and CSAT, customer satisfaction, is certainly one of them. Partner Portal can be a good tool for some of these top-down objectives, but also ask them about outcomes on previous projects like yours. Christine, anything else to think about there?
Yeah, I mean, the other piece I'd really focus on are the PLAs, making ServiceNow measures us right on satisfaction of our customers, certifications, successful outcomes associated with those implementations. So, folks without PLAs, no one is monitoring or measuring that. And then I think the other one that if I had my career right, my customer piece to do all over again is that validated practice. So, making sure that they have the deep expertise. So the difference between the product line achievement and the validated practice is that in the validated practice, ServiceNow experts sit down with you and really dive in to your specific product areas and making sure that you're focused on the right things, right? Your framework of implementation, that you bring to the customer the appropriate governance, right, from a platform perspective. That and it's a very stringent process that you have to go through with multiple sessions and interviews of all your key stakeholders. And that then allows you to know, right? ServiceNow has done their due diligence to validate that these folks know what they're doing. And then the other thing that I would just say is, looking at all the product areas there on the right, I've used kind of a GSI type partner, where they would do anything I asked, right? I've used specialist partners who had that specific area. you really want to get a partner that has that, deep expertise across the platform. And I'm not saying a generalist, right? Because there are a lot of partners out there that will stick anyone on any project. And one of the things, that we do here at Ondaro is really, focus on that expertise. So for instance, I lead our employee experience and our ITSM practices. Right. I did that for 20 years. I've sat in their seat, and that really gives you that better, understanding of what they face on a day-to-day basis. Same, our leader of our ITOM practice, he was an ITOM, he owned the CMDB for a large, financial institution, right? So having folks that have truly sat in your seat, our SPM practices run by a project manager. They know the experiences that you deal with. And I think that's really a game changer.
Absolutely. Christine, it's been fun. For all of our listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. See you at Knowledge. I hope you have a great event. Come by the booth and see us. Christine, they might see you there, correct?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd also say we've got our email here. So if you're interested in hearing more about Ondaro, reach out to us at inbound@ondarawave.com and stop by the booth.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.